so.
So before we get started, if you're a student on your way out, if you can sign the attendance sheet, that way we can get an accurate head count as to who attended. But those of you, I want to welcome you all to Highland Community College, in case you did not know where you were at. I am Mike Kelly. Today we are pleased to welcome Phil S. Dixon for his presentation of the Kansas City Monarchs in your hometown. Our program is brought to us by Kansas Humanities Council, a nonprofit organization that connects communities with history, traditions, and ideas to strengthen civic life. Now, so that we may all enjoy the program, please take a moment, perhaps even 2 moments. It might even be important to take 3 moments to turn off your cell phone, or at least silence them. Let's turn off the future to enjoy the past. Phil is a co-founder of Negro League Baseball Museum in Kansas City. He's the author of 9 books about baseball, including biographies about Wilbur Bullet Rogan and John Buck O'Neill. In the course of his research, he has interviewed over 500 former Negro League players and family members. He has been a member of the KHC Speakers Bureau since 2014. Please welcome Phil S. Dixon.
I'll make sure everybody can hear me. Am I resonating okay? Yeah. All right. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I speak a lot, on weeknights, and I understand you could have been at home watching Dancing with the Stars, right? So anyway, I appreciate you coming out and here tonight. And I'm going to talk about baseball history. And this is a game that I truly love, and I have a passion for it. I've had a passion for it as long as I can remember. And as a matter of fact, when I first started working with baseball-related things, actually, it didn't start with baseball. It started in 1964 with the Beatles. You probably heard of the Beatles, right? And so the Beatles were coming to America, and so what I did was I got all enthused about the Beatles, and I started buying Beatles cards, the collector cards, right? And I made the mistake of taking them to the school, and the teacher said, "These aren't collectibles, these are toys." And she took my Beatles card. I know it's a bad story, isn't it? But when I went back to the store, the only thing left was baseball cards. And so I started collecting baseball cards. At that time, I was in the 2nd grade. By the time I was 19 years old, I had over 100,000 baseball cards. And this wasn't the days, if you go to the store now, you can buy a whole set, right? Back when I had them, you had to buy just 1 pack at a time. So to get to 100,000 cards, I chewed a lot of gum, I'll just put it that way. And I got to know a lot about baseball through reading the backs of baseball cards. Later on, I started reading books. My first book I read was a book on Babe Ruth. How many people heard of Babe Ruth? Heard Babe Ruth. And I didn't know much about baseball. If you had asked me if 714 home runs was good, I wouldn't have known. If you had asked me about a 300 average, is that good? I wouldn't have known much. But in the story, it talked about Babe Ruth eating 21 hot dogs between a doubleheader. I knew what 21 hot dogs was. I never saw anyone eat 21 hot dogs. And so just like that, I became a fan of Babe Ruth, and I was probably in the 3rd grade, 3rd, 4th grade at that time. And it's just been a continuous thing, since then. I will mention that I also worked in Major League Baseball. I was assistant director of public relations for the Kansas City Royals. And they mentioned the Negro League Museum connection. I've done a bunch of things. I've been on PBS series and done a lot of traveling. Matter of fact, 160 cities in the last 4 years. And so I'm trying to get 40 cities this year, and that'll bring me to 200 different cities. And that's a lot of traveling, guys. And I meet a lot of people. And I meet some great people, and I see some great people here tonight. So I appreciate you coming out. So we're going to jump right into the program. Is that okay? You know a little bit about me. And sometimes I try to talk to people before they come in and get an idea. Now tonight I do have my wife with me. I don't know where she went. Oh, there she is in the back. We've been married for 30 years? I can remember the baseball facts, but it's going to be 30, 40 years. So she's here tonight, and so just want to recognize her for sticking through all these baseball stories. I tell stories, and you don't know this, I tell a lot of stories in my baseball history. And this stuff is really fun for me, guys. So That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start off, my programs when I go around, it's called the Kansas City Monarchs in our hometown. And sometimes when I go out east, I might be, like I was in Pennsylvania last year, and I would do the Kansas City Monarchs, the Homestead Grays in our hometown. And so I kind of bounce around, but mostly around this area, I do the Kansas City Monarchs. And the Kansas City Monarchs were a very well-traveled team. So they went all these communities. And so when I do the Kansas City Monarchs in our hometown, I'm going to talk about the Kansas City Monarchs right around in this area. So I'm try to really make it something that you can relate to. All right? So we're going to start with the program. And can everybody see everything okay? Let me do the first slide. Oh, by the way, this is me when I was kind of young, and I'm taking pictures with my baseball cards. So you love your baseball cards when you start taking pictures, right? And that was me. And you can see I had a little more hair back then, guys. But times have changed. And so that's me right there. And that's when my first article that was done on me was not done about history. It's done about me collecting baseball cards. People were pretty fascinated that I had that many baseball cards. Okay, and just in case you didn't know about the Kansas City Monarchs, Kansas City Monarchs were charter members of the Negro National League, which was organized in 1920. And the Kansas City Monarchs were a brand new team. And they had two owners. Matter of fact, the entire league was black. So they had black players, black owners, except for one team. And that was the Kansas City Monarchs. And Kansas City Monarchs had two white owners. And their names were J.L. Wilkinson and Tom T.Y. Baird. And Tom T.Y. Baird is a very interesting person. I'll tell you about a little bit more about him at the very end. But I'll tell you this at the beginning. He went by T.Y. Baird. And the reason he did that is because his middle name was the family name. So the Y stood for younger. And when you put younger with Kansas and Missouri, what do you get, somebody? Younger? Somebody knows? Outlaws, that's right. Cole Younger, who rode with Jesse James. Matter of fact, Jesse James got killed right down the road in St. Joe. So anyway, he didn't want people to connect him with Cole Younger. So he always went by T.Y. Baird. And that was Tom Baird. And then we had J.L. Wilkinson. And he was the other owner. I'm going to tell you about him next. Anyway, the Kansas City Monarchs won their first pennant in 1923. And as everybody knows, baseball wasn't integrated at that time. So they had to play a rival African-American team in the East, which was called Hilldale, the Hilldale Derby Daisies. They played them in 1924. They were out of Philadelphia, and they won their first World Championship. 1925, they went back to the World Series. They had back-to-back World Series. Does that sound familiar to anyone around here? Are there any Royals fans in place? And then in 1929, they won another championship. And guys, this goes on and on and on. And the Kansas City Monarchs play until 1965. Most people don't realize that it went that long. So anyway, this is the Kansas City Monarchs. Okay, in case how many people ever seen a picture of J.L. Wilkinson? J.L. Wilkinson, this is J.L. Wilkinson right here. I guess I got my pointer here. There's J.L. Wilkinson, right there. He was the owner of the Kansas City Monarchs. What can I tell you about J.L. Wilkinson? I can tell you this. J.L. Wilkinson was probably one of the greatest people for, bringing race relations and improving race relations, and he also believed in gender equality. For instance, his first baseball team he organized was called the Bloomer Girls. He believed that girls ought to be playing hardball. And so he had a team that toured around. They were called the Bloomer Girls. And they were all girls except for 5 guys who did the pitching. Now, they dressed up like girls, but they were really guys. Don't ask me where they went to use the restroom. Anyway, that was the Bloomer Girls, and that was his first team that he organized. Then in 1911, he organized a team called the All Nations because he believed that all nationalities should be playing professional baseball together. You heard the story about Jackie Robinson. You know, he doesn't come along until 1940, end of 45, when he signed with the Brooklyn Dodgers. J.L. Wilkinson was doing this in 1911. He's originally born in Algona, Iowa, and that was his original thing. So what he did was, in organizing the team, he went out and got the greatest Cuban player. His name was Jose Mendez, the greatest Cuban pitcher probably of all time. Jose Mendez, and he played right here in the Midwest for J.L. Wilkinson's All Nations. Also, he went down to Glasgow, Missouri, and got John Donaldson, who was probably the greatest left-handed pitcher. Matter of fact, they're trying to get John Donaldson, or I can say we, because I've been on that part of that team as well. into the Hall of Fame. We find over 5,000 strikeouts this guy had. But he's not in the Hall of Fame. But this were the guys that J.L. Wilkinson went out and got. And also, the players loved J.L. Wilkinson. They said that he was probably the only white guy that they ever knew that didn't have 1 ounce of prejudice. And they really talked about him. And guys I interviewed who played during the 20s, who played through the 30s, they always loved J.L. Wilkinson. And how about this? J.L. Wilkinson is also a member of the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. And how many people have ever heard of him? A lot of work to be done, isn't it? And how about this? He even invented some things that are still going on today. For instance, this is first one in 1926. They had started the Centennial Highway Act originally in 1920. And prior to that time, the only way you could travel around this country was by train. So J.L. Wilkinson decided, hey, they're building all these new roads with the Centennial Highway Act. Why don't I just purchase a bus? And so he did that. And the Kansas City Monarchs became your first professional team to ever travel by bus. Matter of fact, nobody traveled by bus until the Kansas City Monarchs did. You guys have a bus? You travel? Think about the Kansas City Monarchs every time you get on that bus, because they were the ones who started. And the Kansas City Monarchs, that was one of his first things. And guys, back then it didn't cost a lot of money. Can you imagine? In 1950, 62 gallons of gas to fill up their bus. This is the original bus. This wasn't the one they had in 1950. Guys, it only cost $17.50 to fill up the whole bus. You can imagine that. So anyway, that's how he started off. And then how about this? 1930, he came up with another invention. He had been tinkering around with this for years. He believed baseball could be played at night. But the major leagues didn't believe it. So J.L. Wilkinson, he went down, actually in 1929, he went down to Haskell Indian College because they were the first ones to have night football. And how many people know about Haskell Indian College? A lot of this history is just right around this area, just sitting right here. Nobody's paying any attention to it. In 1929, they played eight night football games, unheard of. Matter of fact, it was so popular that KU went over and played Haskell. Can you imagine KU playing Haskell? But they did because they wanted to get in part of this action. And people were coming from all around to watch night football. So J.L. Wilkinson took the Kansas City Monarchs to Haskell Indian College. The field was still there. And they turned on the lights and they started hitting fly balls. And they took batting practice. They did everything you could do under the lights. And he said this will work. So in 1930, he came out with some portable lights that they could take around, and they put them on trucks, like these 4 trucks. They were big trucks, and they would drive around, and so they could pull up into any town, and in probably about an hour and a half, they could erect the lights, and they would play night baseball. And the first night baseball games ever played in this area were played by the Kansas City Monarchs. I'll show you that in a moment. So anyway, how about this? The Major Leagues didn't believe it would work. Van Johnson, president of the American League, said that if baseball is to be played in the daytime, night baseball is just a passing thing. And J.L. Wilkinson said that lights will be the baseball what talkies are the movies. And the movies had just started talking in 1926 with Al Jolson's The Jazz Singer. So we know who was right on that, right? Unfortunately, the Chicago Cubs got the memo. They didn't have night baseball for a long time, guys. But J.L. Wilkinson and his Kansas City Monarchs were already doing that. And how about this? The first time that a World Series game was played at night, now the first time I saw a World Series game, it was played in the daytime. Because the first time it was played at night was in 1971, Pittsburgh's Ford Field. That was the first time that a night baseball game was played. This is modern history. How about this? The first time the entire World Series, that's all games in the World Series, was played at night. It was in 1985, the St. Louis Cardinals against who? Royals. All right, we got some Royals fans in here, right? Kansas City Royals. We got some Cardinals fans in here, maybe? I'm wearing a Cardinals hat. Nobody picked that up. Anyway, you said somebody did. Okay. But that's history. So the first time the World Series was played at night was right in the same place where they started night baseball. All right? A little bit of history for you. And how about this? When you think of the great Kansas City Monarchs teams, I'm going to have to see some baseball people's hands. What's the pitcher that you think of first? The great pitcher for the Kansas City Monarchs? Satchel Paige, right. So guess what? Satchel Paige doesn't come to the Kansas City Monarchs until 1939. So we're talking about what 19 years? So who was the great pitcher before thee? The Monarchs are already famous. It was this guy right here, Wilbur Bullet Rogan, who I happen to think, matter of fact, I've written a whole book on him, and I believe he's the greatest all-around baseball player that ever lived. Now remember, I'm just a little kid from Kansas City, Kansas, who collected baseball cards, right? So you know there's some other people who call themselves baseball experts around the country. Now who do they say is the greatest all-around baseball player? That's someone who can hit and pitch, and who did that in major leagues. Who do they say it is? Babe Ruth, that's right. So how does Bullet Rogan compare with Babe Ruth? Okay, so I'm giving you just a few numbers. As a starting pitcher, Bullet Rogan won over 400 games as a starting pitcher. As a strikeout pitcher, he struck out over 3,000 men. He even invented a pitch called the palm ball that he uses to change the pace, and people are still palming the ball today. In addition, when he wasn't pitching, he played the outfield. He was a 300 hitter. In every league he played in throughout his entire career of 18 years, never hit under 300. How about this? He also hit for power. I found over 400 home runs he hit. So he could hit a home run, pitch a shutout, practically win his own baseball game. How about this? He was only 5'7". You know, somebody, we got a Ruth fan here. You know, he's 6'2". This guy's 5'7". And so he's a great player. And let's see, what else can I tell you about Rogan? Okay, how about this? When he wasn't doing all those other things, he also drove the bus. This is Wilbur Bullet Rogan. Today, he is a member of the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. How many people have ever heard of him? You need to know about Bullet Rogan. You know about Babe Ruth, right? You should know about Bullet Rogan. He was right up there with those guys. But he played in the Negro League. But he played against all white major leaguers. All right? He either pitched against them or hit against them. Wilbur Bullet Rogan. That's his wife. He married a farm girl from Carter City, Kansas. I would hate to be sitting behind her in church on Sunday morning. That's Wilbur Bullet Rogan. That's a fantastic player. And he happens to be from my hometown, which is Kansas City, Kansas. He was born in Oklahoma, but he was raised in Kansas City, Kansas, which is where I was raised. So I know lots of people who could firsthand tell you about Bullet Rogan. And the Kansas City Monarchs, they have a Negro League. So remember, they're charter members of the Negro League. But with the Negro League, they would play on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, sometimes Monday or holidays, that kind of thing. So they play their league games. They had St. Louis in the league, Indianapolis, Dayton was in the league, Chicago was in the league. So they had, various league cities in the West. So guess what? If they were going to go from Kansas City to St. Louis, just for example, they had the middle of the week. And this is the time, I can say, you call it the golden age of town baseball. So what they would do is they would go and travel to those towns to play those local teams. And guess what? These local teams weren't black. They were white teams in these towns. And guess what? They wanted to see the Kansas City Monarchs. They wanted to beat the Kansas City Monarchs, but never could. Kansas City Monarchs record. How about this one? This was Arkansas Daily Traveler, Kansas City. That's what I'm saying. They said the Monarchs lost 3 times in over 400 exhibition games. 3 times. You got to think about this record, guys. And think about this. This is the 1920s. All black team. You're going to a town. A lot of small towns. They didn't have that many black people, right? You think that they wanted to lose to the Kansas City Monarchs? No, they didn't want to lose. They enjoyed playing them, but they also wanted to win. But the Kansas City Monarchs were good. They were outstanding. And most people don't realize how good they were. This just gives you a sample. And these same towns will bring them back every year or every couple of years to play. And then I'll just read one thing here. St. Joe Gazette, 1930. They compared the Kansas City Monarchs to the New York Yankees. And when I first came along and I started studying about baseball history, if I didn't know anything about Murderers Row, somebody knows about Murderers Row. I know we got some baseball fans here. That was Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth and Tony Lazzari. You weren't even qualified to be talking about baseball. You didn't know that. So this was a fantastic team, 1927 Yankees. But to be compared with that team lets you know somebody thought they were pretty good. Right? And that's St. Joseph newspaper, right close around here. And then people would always ask me, did the Kansas City Monarchs ever play against Babe Ruth? Of course they played against Babe Ruth. Matter of fact, Bullet Rogan pitched against him. And before the game, Ruth was hitting home runs out the park So Association Park in Kansas City. And Ruth was hitting home runs out the park. When the game started, all they got was 4 singles. And guess what? The park was smaller than Yankee Stadium. Billy Rogan was pitching to him. But Ruth was a guy that everybody liked. And Babe Ruth would come out and play against the black players all the time. Matter of fact, one time they asked Babe Ruth, they said, who's the hardest hitter you ever saw? He said, a guy named John Beckwith who plays in the Negro Leagues. He played against them all. He knew more things than people cared to know because he played against them. You know, now I don't know how much you know about Babe Ruth, but I can tell you a story. I got lots of Babe Ruth stories, but I'm only going to tell you one for time's sake tonight. Babe Ruth, 1927. Babe Ruth made over $200,000. And he was such a popular player that every team in the league had to pay part of his salary. He didn't just get it from the Yankees. And he made over $200,000. And that's including endorsement deals. And somebody came to Babe Ruth and they said, do you know you made more money than the president? And Babe Ruth said, he said, I understand that. He said, because I had a better year. Somebody understands that. That's Babe Ruth. And most people know about Babe Ruth. And when I go places, I test people. What team did Babe Ruth play for? Somebody? New York Yankees. What was his number? Somebody knows. I heard it right over here. Number 3. And what city was he born in? Baltimore. Baltimore. They know all these things. And guess what? These were the same things I learned about baseball. That was my introduction to baseball. What I decided to do was just take it a little bit further. And so now, not only do I know about Babe Ruth, I know about Billy Rogan as well. And guess what? And I love my information on Babe Ruth because I go places and they figure I'm a black guy. I'm not supposed to know about Babe Ruth. But remember all those baseball cards I was reading? Okay, I read all that information, same stuff they read. And this is just an example. This comes from the Norton, Kansas newspaper. And what they would do is in the newspaper, they would give you a sample of where the Monarchs are going to be playing. And so the Monarchs would take them maybe a week, and they would go out and play in all parts of Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma. And this is just one showing you some of the places where they went. And guess what? Most people never think the Monarchs would go to those places. Even today, they never knew that the Monarchs were there. But they were there. So guess what? Did the Monarchs ever come to this area? Absolutely. All right? Okay, so let's see what happened in this area. Okay, about 15, 20 miles from here, Hiawatha, Kansas. The Monarchs were here. 1927, Kansas City Monarchs came and they played a team called the Kimmel Reds, a local town team. Remember the golden age of town baseball? The local team didn't have a chance. 21 to, well, one said 21-1 and one said 21-0. And they played and they said, let's see. And this is the local newspaper because the Monarchs were just too much for the Reds. That was anticipated by all. So they knew the Monarchs were going to be good. So no one was disappointed when the locals were defeated. It also goes on to say, if it were not for the sports who had made little wagers, when those teams came to town, people were gambling on the games. People were gambling on the games. So this was a serious proposition. People would come and they would bet on hits, they would bet on runs, they would bet on all of this. And they were doing this right in little towns when the Kansas City Monarchs came. And so this is part of what happened right here. And that was in 1927. And in 1930, they had started with their night baseball. We talked about night baseball. And this is the truck that the Monarchs had, right here. And then this is kind of like their ad that they use as they travel around the country. Night baseball was the rage, guys. When you play a night baseball game now, you never think about it being modern history. It only goes back to 1930. All right? So this is the Kansas City Monarchs, and this is their ad for their night baseball. And so they come and they play in Falls City. How far? I kind of estimated on 25, 30 miles. That good? Okay, so they play in Falls City. They talk about this is going to be Falls City's first night baseball game. So we play at City Park. The park is still there. And they talk about the Kansas City Monarchs. It tells who bought the team there. And they talked about the Monarchs having a successful year in the National Color League. And they said they're making a barnstorming tour. And so they accepted the offer to play in Falls City. And let's see, what else here? Oh, Falls City, they wanted to get the biggest crowd, so they started advertising to all the local towns. They probably came here advertising. So they were advertising. And T.Y. Baird, remember T.Y. Baird, we talked about the co-owner? He said that you got to make sure you're taking care of this crowd because night baseball is the most popular thing. As a matter of fact, night baseball saved baseball, in case you guys didn't know that. Kansas City Monarchs played. Pretty tight game right there, right? Monarchs won. Remember, they didn't lose very often, right? So Monarchs won. And what's interesting about this, when I go places, if I go to Falls City, which I did go to Falls City in 2014, I believe, people in that city will remember some of those people's names. They might have been older citizens in the community, or maybe they were their baseball coaches. They would remember those names, so this history becomes very relevant. But guess what? They never knew the history till I got there. And they had 1,200 people at the baseball game. You guys have a baseball team here, right? When's the last time you had 1,200 people? Believe me, I coach baseball. If I had 1,200 people, I wouldn't know what to do either. But they don't draw like that anymore. Baseball was our American game, guys. This is no joke. Baseball was our American game, and it can be that again. We just got to create new fans out of everybody. So anyway, this is a little bit about that game. This is Falls City. Matter of fact, the Monarchs had a catcher by the name of Frank Duncan. He's not in the Hall of Fame. But they watched Duncan and they said, this is the greatest catcher we've ever seen. Ever seen. And this guy says, he said, I'm sure that if Duncan was eligible to play an organized baseball, my club will give $50,000 for him. The guy, guess what? He never gets to the major leagues. But you heard of Jackie Robinson? He played with the Monarchs 1 year. Guess who his manager was? Frank Duncan. And how about this? They come to St. Joseph all the time. But they came to St. Joseph. The first night baseball game played in St. Joseph also was played by the Kansas City Monarchs. And let's see. They said all the Monarchs are capable of playing in big-time baseball, but are banned because they're Negroes. This is the local newspaper. They knew what the score was. They knew how good the Kansas City Monarchs were. But guess what? They knew if they got the Kansas City Monarchs there, they were going to have an outstanding game. So this is a little bit about that game. They drew 2,605 people to that game. These are good crowds for a baseball game. And this is not major leagues. It's not minor leagues either. And Kansas City Monarchs ended up winning that game 4-1. And it gave St. Joseph, Missouri, their first time seeing, they called it owl baseball. Owl baseball. They didn't know what to call it. Night baseball. And guys, when we think about night baseball, I played night baseball when I was a little kid. I thought it had been there forever. I had no idea. And you know, the major leagues, the first night baseball game in the major leagues when I was a kid, they would tell us was 1935. And all this is going on in 1930. Cincinnati's Crosley Field, 1930. Was the first night baseball game. But this history predates it, and it's right in this area. This is baseball history, guys, that we're not talking about. And guess what? Also, some of the people, we're not talking about it. These are some of the people who played in that first night baseball game from St. Louis. From St. Joseph. And it's only one of them that I have his last name. It was Russell Speaker. I have his first and last name. But I do have some players from the Kansas City Monarchs that are in red. And those were guys that I interviewed, that I personally interviewed over the years. One of them was Chet Brewer. Chet Brewer, right here, he pitched the game in St. Joseph. Chet Brewer was originally born in Leavenworth, Kansas. And when he was probably, I'd say maybe about 7 or 8 years old, his big toe, and maybe one other toe were partially run over by a trolley car. Got too close to the trolley car, ran over his toe, and so he didn't have a toe. And he used to tell me about this story all the time. And I was talking to him on the telephone. He lived in Los Angeles. And so I told him, I'm coming to Los Angeles. And so I came out there and I spent the night at Chet Brewer's house. What do you think I wanted to know? What do you think I wanted to see? How about that? Yeah, show me the foot, man. So anyway, I can say, you know, with my list of acclaims, I can't say I saw Chet Brewer's feet without the toes. Anyway, Chet Brewer is a man that you probably want to know. Have you ever heard of Bob Watson, who used to play baseball at Houston Astros, scored baseball's 1 millionth run? Chet Brewer signed him. Reggie Smith, he was an AL Rookie of the Year, 1967, first baseball player I ever met. Chet Brewer signed him. Roy White, the outfield for the New York Yankees. Chet Brewer signed him. Bobby Total led the National League in stolen bases. Chet Brewer signed him. And how about this? The infamous Doc Ellis. How many people ever heard of Doc Ellis? Okay, I say infamous. You go back and read up on him, and you'll find out why I call him the infamous Doc Ellis. Chet Brewer signed him. And he, guess what? Are you ready for this one? He signed them because they played on his baseball team. People go around Los Angeles and find these guys, put them on one team. He had 8 guys from one team go to the big league. That's, if there's a coach, if I could have done that, all right? The best player I had went to the NFL. So, Darryl Stuckey played for me. You know, anybody heard Darryl Stuckey? Played safety for the Chargers. Yep. He went to KU. He played for me. But anyway, he was in the NFL. And that's a picture of Chet Brewer. And you know, the Monarchs, they didn't just play regular baseball. They were so good that they would play with you. So whenever a ball was hit to the pitcher, instead of him just picking up throwing the first base, he'd throw it to the catcher, and the catcher would throw out the guy running. Just put on a show. That's the kind of things that they did. That's why people wanted to have them come back. These guys were professional ball players that should have been in the big leagues. Many of them should be in the Hall of Fame, but they're not. But they were good ball players. And that's the kind of things they would do. And people loved seeing the Kansas City Monarchs play. And you know, the 1930s, the Kansas City Monarchs, they had been in night baseball, and night baseball probably by 1932, a lot of minor leagues and stuff, they had started to put up lights as well. So it wasn't as big an attraction as it used to be. So the Kansas City Monarchs, remember, they're always thinking, and T.Y. Baird was always thinking. So he came up with another promotional gimmick to get people to the ballpark. So he said, what we're going to do now, he said, we're going to bring in famous people who play baseball to come in and maybe pitch an inning, to hang, you know, or something like that. So what he did was, he brought in, actually the first one he brought in was Jim Thorpe. How many people ever heard of Jim Thorpe? You ever heard of Jim Thorpe? You need to read about Jim Thorpe. Matter of fact, everybody I'm going to show you now has at least one movie about him. Matter of fact, Burt Lancaster plays Jim Thorpe in this movie. And Jim Thorpe was considered the greatest athlete of the last, I guess, of the 20th century. Not only did he play professional baseball, he played professional football, and he was an Olympic track star, won the decathlon, and so we're talking about a guy who could do a lot. I don't know if he played basketball, but if he wanted to, he probably could have. That's Jim Thorpe, Native American Indian, right? And most people have never heard of it, right? And this is history. When I was coming along, we heard of Jim Thorpe, but now we have generations who are forgetting about Jim Thorpe. Another one, Jesse Owens. Have you heard of Jesse Owens? I had a movie, I think, what, maybe about a year ago? That's probably the 3rd movie on him. He was in the 1936 Olympics. That was the year that he went to the Olympics, and Hitler had the Aryan race. They were supposed to win everything. And then Jesse Owens had 4 gold medals. And Jesse Owens was traveling around, not with the Kansas City Monarchs. He traveled around with a team called the Toledo Crawfords, who played the Kansas City Monarchs. And he would come out between doubleheaders, and he would race a horse and beat the horse running. Now, can a man beat a horse running? Really, he can't. But what they would do is, you know, if you ever watch the horse run, they got to get it to a gallop, right? Where a man, if he's sitting in the block, he can just shoot straight out. So they had it marked off, so by the time the horse got in the gallop, the race was over. And Jesse Owens had won again. That's Jesse Owens. And these guys were traveling around, so guess what? People are coming because this is the only way they can see Jesse Owens in person. This is the only way they can see Jim Thorpe in person. And they played around in this area. How about this one? Grover Cleveland and Alexander. They joined a team called the House of David. Grover Cleveland Alexander. And Grover Cleveland Alexander, he had won 73 games in the National League. And he still holds the record for the most shutouts by a National League pitcher. And he was retiring, but guess what? Back then they didn't get any big pensions or anything like that, so he wanted to keep playing. So he would come out and he'd pitch 1 inning a night for the House of David against the Kansas City Monarchs, then he would go sit down. And all over America, people came out to see the Monarchs play against Grover Cleveland Alexander. They went all the way through Canada and playing the game. Now, I have to tell you, now Grover Cleveland only had to pitch 1 inning. but some nights he couldn't come out and pitch that one inning. And the reason why is Grover was known to take a nip. Somebody know what that is? Take a nip? He said he knows. He used to drink. And so sometimes he would just be drunk and he couldn't come out and pitch. And how about this one? He has a movie about it. How many people heard of Ronald Reagan, 40th President of the United States? You can go find that movie. He plays Grover Cleveland Alexander in a movie called The Winning Team. And that's the story of Grover Cleveland. I don't know if they talk about the alcoholism in there, because, you know, baseball, we don't like to talk about some of the seed side, right? We like the glory side. But there's a movie about Grover Cleveland and Ronald Reagan's in it. Then also, guess what? Remember the Monarchs played against girls and that kind of thing? Well, Babe Dietrichson. I don't know if you heard of Babe Dietrichson. How many people have ever heard of Babe Dietrichson? Are they Dietrichson? Zaharias. She married a wrestler named Zaharias. He was a famous wrestler. So, and guess what? Not only did she win medals in the Olympics, but she was a professional golfer. She's in the Golf Hall of Fame. She had her own line of clubs and everything. This lady was a fantastic athlete, and they found her playing basketball. That's where she was discovered. She never went to college. They found her playing basketball, and they recruited her from the basketball court to the Olympics, and she won awards. And she played against the Kansas City Monarchs. She would come out and pitch one inning a night, like Grover Cleveland for the House of David. She would pitch one inning a night, and all across America, everybody wanted to see Babe Dietrichson, because this is the only way they could see her and meet her. The interesting thing about her, how good was she? Well, I don't know how many of you have ever heard of Burley Grimes. Burley Grimes was the last man who could legally throw the spitball in the major leagues. And so Burley Grimes saw her at a camp down in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and he said if she was a man, she'd be a #1 draft pick. That's pretty good right there, isn't it? But most people don't know about Babe Dietrichson. Guess what? She's got a movie about her as well. You can read about all these historic figures. And this is how the Monarchs stayed afloat, because they had all these great promotions that they were taking all over communities, and they were all in this area with these promotions as well. And most of the people, I mentioned the House of David. Well, this is the House of David right here that they played for. And the House of David, you know, sometimes when I talk to young people, I have to let them know these aren't hippies from the 1960s. This is how they looked back then. They were from Benton Harbor, Michigan. And they were guys who were so good, they should have been in the major leagues, but they were dedicated to their religious belief. They believed they were one of the lost tribes of David. And so they did not cut their hair or their beards. And you notice Grover Cleveland didn't have a beard, so he didn't have to wear that. Matter of fact, I don't know if you know this, Satchel Paige was the first player in the major leagues to have a mustache in modern day. Everybody cut their mustache off. So anyway, but the House of David, so they were kind of unusual to look at. They were pioneers of frozen foods. And guess what? They invented something that you probably have all used and never knew. How many people have ever heard of the waffle cone? That was invented by the House of David Religious Colony in Benton Harbor, Michigan. How many people have heard of Sinbad, the comedian? He's from Benton Harbor, Michigan. I don't think he's a member of the House of David. But he's from Benton Harbor. That's the city. And this guy right here in the middle, his name was Doc Talley. Doc Talley hit over 600 home runs. If he wasn't so dedicated to the colony, he probably would have been in the major league. And might have been in the Hall of Fame. But most people don't even remember Doc Talley today. But this is part of that history. And they played the House of David all through this area. So you guys don't remember them, but believe me, no matter where you come from, your grandparents probably remember, or your great-grandparents. I don't know how young you are. And I know you heard of this guy, Jackie Robinson, right? And did you know he was stolen from the Kansas City Monarchs? Now, how many people saw the movie 42? Did you notice they never mentioned how he got to the Dodgers? They never mentioned. But T.Y. Baird always let people know that the Dodgers didn't give the Monarchs 1 cent for this player. They came and they basically signed him. And they had, Branch Rickey had the Kansas City Monarchs over a barrel. And here's the why. Now, based on the history that I gave you today, right? So remember, you got 2 white men who own the Kansas City Monarchs. So if they try to get Jackie Robinson back, they're going to say these white guys are holding the black players back, and it's their fault. So they couldn't do that. So they said, all right, then we'll let Jackie go, and what we'll do is we'll make sure we have good contracts from everybody else. And so that's what they did. So Jackie Robinson goes on and goes to the big leagues, and the Monarchs put everybody under contract. And the Monarchs decide they're going to have their own boycott against the Brooklyn Dodgers. So they get people like Elston Howard, 1964 MVP. How about Ernie Banks? You ever heard of him? He's with the Kansas City Monarchs, 1953, 1950. Who else was that? Kurt Roberts, the first black player who played for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He was on there. George Altman. Let me put it like this. Satchel they sent 17 guys to the big leagues, straight from the Monarchs. How many of you think went to the Brooklyn Dodgers? Not a single one. That was their own boycott because they had stole Jackie Robinson. And also, Tom Berry said, I've been informed that Mr. Rickey is a very religious man. He said, if such is true, it appears that his religion runs for the Almighty God. And so Tom Berry liked to take pot shots at him for stealing that player. And this is a history that they didn't tell in the movie. And how about this? You know Jackie Robinson, most of all of us have read, he's the first modern day black player in the Major League, right? And who was the second? Doby. Okay, we got Larry Doby. And who was the third? You know? I'm going to take a guess. Guesses are good. You take a guess? There's somebody guessing out there. Enter Larry Doby? Okay. Any?
Hank. I was about to say Hank Aaron.
Hank Aaron, that's all right. That's a good guess. Not right, but that's a good guess.
That's what I was thinking about.
That's all right. Hank Aaron didn't come up till 1954. But guess what? You need any more guesses?
Frank Robinson.
No, not Frank Robinson. I don't know if I give you guys any better hint. It was Willard Brown and Hank Thompson. They went up together. Actually, they were the first two black players signed together. Jackie Robinson came up by himself. Larry Doby came up by himself. They're the only black guy on the team. Then they signed these two guys on the same day from the same team. So they come from the Kansas City Monarchs. Tom Beard, Jay Wilkinson said, hey, just take your ball glove and your spikes. You don't need anything else. The big league club, they have everything you need. So these two guys went to the last place St. Louis Browns. And so they went out to take batting practice, and Willard Brown looked in the bat rack, and he said, you guys don't have any bats. They said, well, this is all of our bats. They said, what kind of bat you use? He said, I use a 40-ounce bat. They said, well, we don't have one that big. No one ever asked for one. So he goes over to his teammate. Now, he's got a teammate he can talk to. He says to Hank Thompson, no wonder they're in last place. You don't have any bats. So anyway, he borrows a bat, 34-ounce bat, goes out, and on August 13, 1947, he becomes the first black player to hit a home run in the American League. In the American League, he did it before Doby did. And when he came back to the home plate, a player from the Browns came out and said, "Did you use my bat to hit that home run?" He said, "Yeah, I just got it out of the rack." And the player took the bat, and then he went to the concrete wall of the dugout, and he smashed it on the wall to the floor. That's how tough it was. And Willard Brown went back to Hank Thompson. He's sitting down beside him. He said, "And can you imagine? These are going to be our teammates." It's tough. But those guys had a story, and guess what? Nobody remembers it. Larry Doby, they just made a statue to him, right? Nobody remembers these two guys. What's interesting is Hank Thompson, they said, actually when they released him later, about a month later, they said they didn't have the qualities to be big league players. Well, Willard Brown never made it back to the big leagues, but guess what? Today he's a member of the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. He had over 600 home runs himself. He's in the Hall of Fame. Same people who said he wasn't good enough, they're not even on the Hall of Fame. But he is today. And Hank Thompson goes on to become the first black player to be the first black player on the St. Louis Browns and also the New York Giants. He integrated two teams. But these are guys who weren't good enough to play for a last place team. Really, they were. But it's the racism that was in the game. And so these are a couple of guys. And I can't go anywhere without finishing without talking about these two players right here. And you know, baseball has these colorful nicknames, right? And you know, sometimes with nicknames, you don't even need to know baseball history, but you'll know the nickname. If I was to say Shoeless, what would you say? If I said Mickey, what would you say? And Yogi. You know, none of those were their real names. They were their real nicknames. So if I said Dizzy, what you gonna say? Yeah. Matter of fact, I was somewhere and I said, if I say Pee-wee, somebody in the background said Herman. They weren't a baseball fan, I'm sure. Right? So anyway, Dizzy Dean, 1934. I'll give you a quick story. I'm almost to the end. Dizzy Dean, 1934. He's pitching for, actually, in the beginning of the season, his brother had joined as a rookie. And his brother was nicknamed Daffy Dean. And Branch Rickey at that time was the general manager of the St. Louis Cardinals. So he went in and he said, look, me and my brother are going to win, he said, we're going to win 40 games this year. His brother just a rookie. He pitched in the big league. And Branch Rickey said, he just kind of laughed at him because Dizzy Dean was known to say outlandish things. Anyway, at the end of the season, they had won 49 games. And back in those days, they didn't have the playoffs, so they went right to the World Series. They finished them first, went to the World Series. And the Cardinals won the World Series, and the Dean brothers won 4 games, and that's how the Cardinals won the World Series. So they won over 50 games that year, 2 brothers. It was an all-time record for 2 brothers. And so guess what? They could have went home. They got $5,000 each for playing in the World Series. They could have went home, but guess what they decided to do? They said, we're going to go out, we're going to barnstorm against 4 black baseball teams. So they barnstormed 6 games against Kansas City Monarchs. They started Oklahoma City, ended up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Then they jumped over to Philadelphia and they played the Philadelphia Stars, another black team. Then they jumped over and they played, they said New York Black Yankees. Played them in Brooklyn, played them in Patterson, New Jersey. Then they finished with 3 games against the Pittsburgh Pirates. And it was the first time Dizzy had ever seen Satchel Paige. And so that was Dizzy Dean. He could have quit, but he played. And so Dizzy Dean becomes a legend. And then he meets Satchel Paige for the first time. And if you ever heard Dizzy Dean, my friend, I do have just one quote. It says, anybody who's ever had the privilege of seeing me pitch knows that I'm the greatest pitcher in the world. And he said these kind of things all the time. But at the end of that barnstorming series, somebody asked him, said, Dizzy, who's the greatest pitcher you've ever seen? And back in those days, guys, all the baseball players were called boys. So he said, I see a lot of boys in the big league. He said, including myself. He said, but the greatest pitcher I've ever seen is a colored boy named Satchel Paige. He said, if you could get him and me on the same team, he said, we could win the pennant by the 4th of July and go fishing till the World Series started. That was Dizzy Dean. Great story, matter of fact. I'm writing a book on Dizzy Dean and then that whole experience because I find it quite fascinating, all the things that happened in that series. But he met Satchel Paige for the first time. And most of you have heard of Satchel Paige, probably, right? Have you heard something about Satchel Paige? He's got a lot of books about it. Satchel Paige, I call him like, he would be like the LeBron James of the Negro Leagues. He didn't have to ride on the bus because he was such a celebrity. He could drive his own car. And he had 2 Cadillacs. He had a black one and a pink one. Oh, don't laugh. Elvis had a pink one too. And he'd pull up in town in either one of those cars. But the problem was Satchel had was he could never get anywhere on time. So he was notorious for being late. And if you put another baseball player with him, he was going to be late as well. So he had to travel by himself. And as the story goes, he was traveling through a small town, probably in Kansas somewhere. And when he was traveling, he was pulled over by the local sheriff for speeding, trying to get to the ball game. The sheriff said, well, speeding through our town, we're going to take you before the judge today, and you go ahead and pay your fine, you'll be on your way. Satchel says, no problem. So he goes before the judge, and the judge says, okay, speeding through our town, he said, that's going to cost you $25. And Satchel said, Your Honor, I'm going to give you $50. And the judge said, what is this for? He said, well, I'm coming back through here this evening. That was Satchel Paige. Great stories about Satchel Paige, guys. You pick up the book, the stories out, great stories. Satchel Paige. I always like to talk about these 2 guys because they go on, and by 1942, guys, they're playing exhibition games against each other, and they're raising money for the war effort. And then remember, I've been talking about Tom Baird, right? I've been talking about him all week, right? Did you know he was a member of the Ku Klux Klan? How about this? 1920, the Monarchs organized, right? In 1922, the governor of Kansas heard that the Ku Klux Klan had infiltrated the entire state. And he wanted to know to what degree. So he put people undercover to go to the various cities and find out who were members of the Ku Klux Klan and to keep a list, and that list today is in Washington, D.C., in the mayor's record. And when you got to my hometown, Kansas City, Kansas, where Tom Baird lived, guess who was a member of the Ku Klux Klan? Matter of fact, my hometown had the biggest chapter, Kansas City, Kansas. And there's Tom Baird's name on the list. And guess what? That's a pretty bad story, isn't it? But that's not the end of the story. Probably when Tom Baird died, he died in 1962. He lived on 27th Street. I lived on 30th Street. Not too far, walking distance. And when he died, his daughter took everything, boxed it up, and put it in the basement. And it stayed there until one day I came knocking on the door, asking about Tom Baird. A young black guy asking about a former Ku Klux Klan member, Tom Baird. And guess what? Me and his daughter really hit it off. Her name was Harriet Wickstrom. I have letters from her right up to the time she died. And at that time, KU, Kansas University, was putting together a collection of African American artifacts. And through my conversations with her and her effort, she boxed up everything and she sent it to Kansas University. And today, Tom Baird's records are sitting right in Kansas University. And if anybody wanted to go there to do any research, you can do it because the records are there. And that part came out of that relationship. Harriet Wickstrom was his daughter. So sometimes history is not over until we end it, all right? She's gone on to glory. I'm still out here telling the story about that. So, and this just gives you a little idea, guys, of what I've been able to do. I go across and talk about baseball, but mainly I'm talking about people unifying and coming together. See, none of this history would have happened if those small towns didn't bring the Kansas City Monarchs there. The Kansas City Monarchs, when it came time to send ball players to the major leagues, if you can't make money, you won't have a team, and you wouldn't have sent all those great players to the major leagues. These small towns were very important, but relationship was very important. And it's important to us today as we move along, especially in these difficult times. And in 2013, I looked at the world, and I looked at my country. I said, this is not the America I grew up in. So I decided I was going to go out and go to as many cities as I can to bring a message of unity using baseball. And that's how I ended up here tonight. Matter of fact, Senator Bob Dole, Republican, you probably heard Bob Dole, right? Somebody knows about Bob Dole. I heard that he was going to go to every county in the state of Kansas. And he was 94 years old and in a wheelchair. I said, Bob Dole can do it, you can do it too. I don't have Bob Dole's money, but believe me, I got something he doesn't have, and that's a youth. And so that's the reason why I'm here. So yeah, Bob Dole will blame for me being here tonight too. So anyway, I do want to thank you, and whenever I go somewhere, I always try to end with a little bit of poetry. And so, with me, guys, and I'm going to encourage you. Everybody's in school here, mostly, and you got some teachers and things like that, guys. This is the most important place you can be. The written word is important. There's so much you can do with the written word. Look, guys, I've written books. I've written the back of baseball cards. That was quite an honor for me to be able to write the backs of baseball cards. But I couldn't have done that if I didn't sit in a classroom and absorb the information that you're getting here today. So I encourage you guys to take your education very, very serious. All right? So I'm going to end with a bit of some poetry. How about that? And give me a little drink of water here. And then I'll open up for question and answer. And I just want to, once again, thank everybody for coming tonight. All right?
Thank you.
So I hope you enjoyed yourself. You know, it's kind of different twist on baseball. And I'm going to do something called The Stars That Did Not Shine. It was originally a song I heard. And you know, you watch the rappers, and they'll sample something, song you know, and then put something else with it. Well, I just did the same thing with poetry. You can learn from the young people too. So it goes like this. I'll use some of the names from my presentation. So it goes like this. My name is Wilbur Bullet Rogan. My name is John Donaldson. My name is Jose Mendez, but my age is way beyond. I spent my prime in baseball shoes, but my sporting days are gone. And I'm just one more forgotten face among the black-faced teams, an old dark horse that came to course they called the Negro Leagues. And I worked the fields in Tennessee, but I dreamed of better days. So I left the plow, the pick and bag to join the Homestead Grades. And all summer long we played the states, then headed south for fall. Through rain and dust we rode the bus so we could play baseball. And we played for love, and we played for pride, and we seldom made much more. The bread, the beans, the hotel bugs, the roads, the crowds from the floor. The all-night rides, the city side came with the life I chose, but we made do, and we came through, but damn it, we were pros. And we played in the shadow of the Babe, Lou Gehrig, and the rest, then stood outside that big league fence while they were called the best. But we played them well and we gave them hell with every hitting pitch, then stayed behind that color line and watched those boys get rich. But did they see Josh Gibson swing or Satchel throw his stuff? Or do you know how bad it feels when your best is not good enough? When clouds roll in across the sky to hide the brightest moon, is then you'll find some stars don't shine, some folks were born too soon. So God bless you, Jackie Robinson, Willie Mays, and all. You wore our numbers on your backs when you played big league ball. And every time you hit one out, slid or laid one down, you carried us from that old bus to the halls of Cooperstown. Now, my name is John Buck O'Neill. My name is Willard Brown or Hank Thompson, but you won't remember that. I'm just one more along the score who played with ball and bat. But everyone, when you seek out heroes and you praise this great pastime, remember those old brown-faced pros, the stars that did not shine. I do have a couple of things. I did bring some baseball cards along. Remember I said I did baseball cards, wrote the back? Well, I actually produced a set of baseball cards, and I bought these along. I only bring them on my tour now. They're from 1987, but they're $45. I didn't bring any books tonight, but I did bring a flyer. And so I have one from my Bullet Rogan book, and if somebody wants to, purchase it and pay for it, I'll autograph it and I'll eat the postage. Okay. And I do have some pictures of the Kansas City Monarchs, panoramic pictures from the 1920s. So now, originally I asked if you had any questions. Nobody had many. I'm going to ask one more time. You have any questions? All right, got one right.
When the KC Monarchs went to St. Joseph, what field they played?
They played, I think, at White City Park. So I think it's still the same park that's there. And some of these parks still exist in these towns. When I go, it's amazing. These parks are still there, especially in the small towns. So,
were there any other Negro teams that played well into the 60s besides the Monarchs? And what do you attribute that to, after 15 plus years of the major leagues?
Well, people in small towns, a lot of cities still had strong baseball programs. And so they kept their semi-pro teams. And it sometimes be a factory team or local town team. And they still had those type of teams. And so they had turned into an attraction, and they had parks and things like that. So they would continue to bring those teams in. So it was still money to be made. And so the Kansas City Monarchs were still coming into town. Chicago American Giants, the Detroit Stars, Indianapolis Clowns. The Indianapolis Clowns were still on the road in 1971. So it's a long history. But they didn't make quite the money they were making, in the 30s and the 40s before integration. But there was still money to be made, especially in small towns.
So, like, if they, at the gate when they collected, like, the admission charges, then did the Monarchs get a cut of that money?
Monarchs got 65% of the gate. And it's going to be the biggest crowd of the year. So, and the home team was happy to get that other percentage because it was the most they got any time either. So, I'll take one more.
I don't know how to necessarily ask the question, but we just were watching a documentary about some of the players that are getting pensions now. Now, the research that they had to do. So I'm not really sure what I want to ask, but I'm just kind of curious about the players, if there's proof that they played in the Negro Leagues, they can get Major League pension now.
Yeah, over the years they've kind of modified it a couple of times, but they used to say if you had 5 years in the Negro Leagues, but a lot of those guys died out. So now I know that they're giving health insurance for people who played in the Negro Leagues because they realized that there was a lot of racism in baseball, and some people think that there still is. So anyway, Major League Baseball has had to try to do something. And so, they do the Negro League night, that kind of thing. One thing the NBA did, I thought was interesting, they started playing this year at the NBA during the month of February. There was a big movement, so several teams started playing the Negro National Anthem at the beginning of the games. I don't know, did anybody know that? Lift Every Voice and Sing? I don't know if anybody knows the song. Everybody know the words to Lift Every Voice and Sing?
How does it go?
Gotta look that one up. It's called the Negro National Anthem. So I know the Cleveland Cavaliers did all the month of February. So there's some interesting things going on in sports right now. So, but yeah, they did provide money. Okay, is that it? I want to thank Stacy. Stacy was the one who got me here. And from here, I'm headed to all the big cities, guys. I'm heading to Burlington, Kansas next week. And then I'll be out in Colby, Kansas. Hopefully, when you get that close, anybody been to Colby before? Yeah. When you get to Colby, I really want to go to Colorado, but I got to go back home. Anyway, but you know, I've had a lot of fun. I've met a lot of great people. So 40 more cities this year. This is the first city for this year. So thank you you've been a wonderful partner. Thank you very much, guys. Have a good evening.